right, everybody. Welcome back into the Fantasy 5 podcast, brought to you by Sideline Sports Network. I'm your host, JT, and let's hop right into it. We're going to be talking Week 8 today. We're going to be previewing Week 8. We're going to be talking injuries, waiver wire pickups, and rookie rankings, our three classic segments. So we're going to start off with injuries as usual. First up, we've got the biggest hit possibly we've had all year. Unfortunately, it comes to a rookie. That's Breece Hall. Heartbreaking. He's emerged the last few weeks as a leading running back in the entire league, not to mention this rookie class. But unfortunately, he tore his ACL this week and also has a minor meniscus injury. So, he's going to be out for the year. But even with this setback, the Jets still remain one of the most interesting teams in the NFL as they immediately made a move for James Robinson. As far as fantasy goes this week, look to Michael Carter to have a big impact. James Robinson, although he's going to be on the team, surely he's going to, he's not going to be getting full game touches as he's still going to be getting acclimated to the playbook, what have you. So, look to Michael Carter over James Robinson this week. But as the season goes on, that certainly may switch, and I would expect it would. Next up, we've got DK Metcalf. He's week to week with a knee injury to his patellar tendon. He's doubtful to practice this week, so he's likely out against the Giants Sunday. Simple as that. Next up, Mark Andrews for Baltimore. Another knee injury here for the current number 2 tight end in fantasy. He was essentially a decoy last week against the Browns as he logged 0 catches on 2 targets. He had a 4-yard run. That was literally his only touch of the game. Lastly, the Ravens have a short week this week. They play tonight, so double check his status if you plan on starting him for this week. The injury report's going to come out 90 minutes before game time, so double check with that. Next up, Deebo Samuel. He has a hamstring injury. He's day-to-day. He didn't practice on Wednesday. He played last week. He played all but 1 snap with Jimmy G, so he either toughed it out last week or he aggravated something near the end of the game. So another thing to keep an eye on. Who knows if he's going to play this week. He is day-to-day rather than week-to-week, so it's a little bit more hopeful. But nonetheless, we move on. Amon-Ra St. Brown, my guy, he's on my fantasy team. Unfortunately, he was placed in the concussion protocol and was said he wasn't cleared to play. He wasn't cleared to come back and play for the rest of the game last week, but he was eventually put in the concussion protocol and is eventually cleared of having a concussion in the first place. So, as I said, there was a new protocol implementation that ruled him out for the remainder of the game. But head coach Dan Campbell said on Monday that things are certainly looking good for him to come back in Week 8. So that's some promising news for an injury headline that you didn't want to see. So he's the last one I'm talking about as far as injuries. So we're going to move right on to the waiver wire pickups for this week. First up, I've got to touch on my pick from last week, Deonta Foreman. If you didn't hear, he was one of my waiver wire pickups for last week. And mere hours after I recorded the podcast and posted it, Christian McCaffrey was traded to the 49ers, and Deonta Foreman all of a sudden was the talk of the fantasy world for that night. So I give myself props for that. That was my first big good call. So I'm hoping to make some in the future. Got one today that I think could possibly be the next big thing in the next couple of weeks. So with that, we move right along. First up for the waiver wire, we've got Tyler Algier for the Falcons. He's currently available in 70% of leagues. As Quandre Patterson's still out. He's on the IR for at least another week or so. He is looking good, though. So as soon as he comes back, he's definitely going to be taking some of the touches. So this is going to be the last week or so that Algier is going to be able to put up roster-worthy numbers for you. So with that said, I really like him this week against the Panthers. I see a grounded pound kind of conventional type of contest between these two teams. Atlanta's shown that kind of tough physical running game throughout the past 7 weeks. So look to them to continue that this week. Next up, we've got Gus Edwards. We've got J.K. Dobbins freshly being on the IR. Last week was the first week he was put on the IR. So Gus Edwards is primed to continue to be a consistent runner for your fantasy team for weeks to come. It should be noted, though, he himself is also returning off an ACL injury. Not also an ACL injury. J.K. Dobbins has a knee injury. Gus Edwards just recently came back from an ACL injury that took him out of the season last year, and he's currently questionable tonight against Tampa. So if he manages to stay healthy, expect him to get several red zone touches and plenty of other opportunities to shine. Next up, Wanda Robinson. He's on the Giants. He's definitely, I would consider him a floor guy for your roster, but this emerging Giants wide receiver one seems to be getting a bigger role in each game he plays. A Giants fan who's also my barber was telling me about a month ago how anxious he was to get Wandale back after he had an early season injury. So I'm also jumping onto the Wandale Robinson train now too. And that's not just because he won me a receiving yards prop last week. I think it was 31.5 yards, and he crushed that. I think he got 47 or so. So props to him. Next up, Garrett Wilson. He had a rough patch there for the last couple of games, but he managed 4 catches last week in a really boring game against Denver. I can't stop talking about him. He was in the rookie rankings for a few weeks, and then now he's reemerged to become a waiver wire pickup. So good for him to stay relevant. However, the injuries of Breece Hall and Corey Davis can't be overlooked. So even if Corey Davis is considered day-to-day, Garrett Wilson has no other option but to perform in this position if the Jets team has any hopes in making a playoff run this year. And it's simple as that. It's time to put up or shut up for Garrett Wilson. And lastly, I said I've got another pick. And I think the one guy who could potentially really benefit from a trade now is Nico Collins for Houston. So similar to my Deonta Foreman pick from last week, I have Nico Collins on this list because I see another player from that team leaving soon, and that player is Brandon Cooks. He certainly wants to get back into a winning team, like back in his Rams days, and I believe that he's going to be traded in the next week or two. And when that happens, Nico Collins is going to become the Texans wide receiver one, and he's currently averaging a measly 5 targets a game, but his fantasy future is undoubtedly bright. And that's going to do it for the waiver wire. So we're going to move right into the rookie rankings next. And we've got a couple new guys. And nice to see. We've got, first up, George Pickens for the Steelers. He finally notched his first score last week. Unfortunately, it was the final straw in me losing my matchup against an opponent. So that's a bummer to see. But, George Pickens played well. He had a season-high 18.1 fantasy points. Nonetheless, he's proving himself to be a valuable asset to a team that's really struggling to kind of find its identity in the Steelers so far. So hopefully George Pickens can really keep it up and, solidify himself as a good part of this offense. Next up, Chris Olave for the Saints. Despite their 2-5 record, Olave is, consistently producing for the Saints. Last week, he tallied his second 100-yard game, grabbing 7 catches off of fantastic 14 targets. So it's going to be tough for him to stay out of this leaderboard as the season trudges on, as he hasn't scored under 15 fantasy points since week 2, I believe it is. So he's very consistent, and, he's a great route runner. He's a slot guy, so he's going to be able to get, those touches in the game. Good player. Next up, Kenneth Walker, the third for the Seahawks. He's fantastic. He was one of my Fantasy 5 waiver wire picks last week, and man, did he show out. He had 168 yards off of 23 rushes, and he had 2 scores to add on to that. That's going to be 28 fantasy points, which is good for second in the league for running backs. So he had a huge week last week. So big props to him as he hopes to, keep that hot streak alive, as well as continuing to muster up a season for the Seahawks that nobody saw coming. So big for Kenneth Walker Jr. He's really taking advantage of this Rashad Penny injury. Hopefully he's going to be able to keep it going. Next up, Dameon Pierce for the Texans. We've seen him quite a lot in this leaderboard. So, man, did the running backs in this draft really take over so far. Pierce has shown a masterclass in adapting to, the pressures that come in the NFL, notching his 3rd straight 90-yard running game this past week. But his ability to break tackles remains his X factor. So, I would look for him to get several receptions this week against a really stout Titans defense. They really stack the middle sometimes. So he may get more success getting, those dump off passes or screens, stuff like that this week, as opposed to, the run and gun right down the middle. And lastly, as we touched on before, Breece Hall, I've got him as my number 1 guy right now is in rookie rankings. He's played unstoppable. He got injured in the second quarter of the game last week, and before that, he had 4 carries. Guess how many yards he got in those 4 carries? I'll give you 3 seconds before I tell you. He had 72 yards on those 4 carries and a touchdown. He was an absolute monster. I can't reiterate what a tough loss this is for the Jets. Surely Breece is going to, continue to be a source of support for the team as they look forward to the rest of their schedule, but uh, it's going to be nearly impossible for him to obviously sustain a top 5 ranking on my prestigious Fantasy 5 rookie rankings leaderboard with only 7 weeks of stats, but I'm sure it's going to be, a week or two before I feel that there's truly 5 rookies with, better performances than what Breece Hall has put on this season through 7 weeks. So right now he's at the top of my leaderboard, and yeah, huge props to him. It's such a bummer that he's going to be out for the rest of the season, but that's pretty much all I've got this week. Again, no bet slip. We're probably going to be back with the bet slip next week. I'm not even sure who's playing on Thursday Night Football, but next week that is. But yeah, thank you guys very much for tuning in. It was a fun one this week. Thank you guys uh, for continuing to support the show. Leave a like, subscribe to the YouTube page, Sideline Sports. Leave a comment under the Fantasy 5 videos. Follow me on Twitter, Jake Taylor 123, Instagram, Jake Taylor 1648, and yeah, keep looking forward to more podcasts because they're coming, and we're really working to really get this thing off the ground here. So feel free to comment things you'd like to hear, things you'd like to see, and thank you guys very much for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week.